I shared with you in Module 1 my own life experience of the way in which I gradually regained a sense of self-worth, of knowing that I was loved and knowing that I was made to enjoy being who I was created to be. And I also shared with you the very important part that being a part of an a cappella choir, re-engaging with something that gave me great joy and that filled my heart with an innate joy of being able to sing and take pleasure in something that was about me, how those two things gave me the energy to eventually escape from that sense of desperation and despair, that black hole that was tearing apart not just me but also my partner as well. Because what I again want to reiterate, as it informs also this sensitivity one, is this recurring nightmare, this period, the honeymoon periods I shared with you, when we were all for each other, we existed for each other, we were loyal to each other no matter what. That then led to periods of tension and growing frustration, anger, and the inability to own our own distinctive feelings and values and still be in a relationship, which would then lead to the explosive periods of emotional and regrettably physical violence towards me. It was one of the factors. Some of you might be wondering why I was encountering this physical violence, what caused me to leave. When we saw our GP at one point, the GP expressed concern that one time in this dynamic I might one day react and strike first, and that would be a horrendous next step in the destruction of our relationships. So the advice, ironically, at the time was, when I saw this emerge, was to run, to get out, to break this cycle. Of course, ultimately, I need to break this cycle permanently if we were not able to both independently break this cycle. So this codependency actually was a predictive rhythm. Both my partner and I actually knew how to, believe it or not, live this way. It was a destructive lifestyle, but it was one that we were familiar with. So many people wonder why people stay in abusive relationships. Well, these relationships are at least familiar. You know what to do in them. If you break free of them, now you're in a new place. You are lost, and in fact you are very dead within yourself. And that's what I want to share, is that a turning point, another thing that informed my new sense of sensitivity, was that whilst in the latter stages of this relationship, I mentioned that my wife felt that if I could stabilize my career in terms of a more clear pathway rather than being in the creative arts, that's what we should pursue. So I went and saw a careers counsellor, and I shared that I wanted to move out of this creative arts precarious lifestyle into something more stable. But within a few minutes, the counsellor could sense, no doubt her sensitivity towards me, that something else was going on, and she checked and asked, is that really what I wanted to do? And of course it wasn't what I wanted to do, and I shared my concerns, I shared my sense of loyalty to my partner, that I didn't want us to break up and that somehow, we were going to... And she reflected to me that perhaps I was not sensitive, that in fact the relationship had already died. And hearing that and letting that in to me actually opened the floodgate of tears, of a grief that I hadn't really owned for myself. In fact, I was actually blind to the fact that here I am trying to preserve this relationship when in fact it had already died. And I needed to actually have a new perception about that. So that was another factor in contributing to my ability to break out of this vicious, and I mean vicious cycle that was destroying not only me, but was also destroying my partner. But having left that destructive relationship, and as I began to recover my sense of self, my value, my sense of well-being, I had a new question. I had been vulnerable. I had thought that vulnerability was the path to growth and openness, and I'd ended up here. Dr. Brené Brown notes that vulnerability is not about letting it all hang out, because you can actually set yourself up for this kind of dynamic where you think, oh, if I just totally expose myself, then all will be well. But this is not a wise way to be in the world. Our skin, our bodies are vulnerable things, but they actually also have protective covering. Our bodies receive and extend out and experience senses in the world, but they also have shutdown mechanisms so that we don't become overwhelmed. So again, the body has so much wisdom to teach us, and that's what I'm hoping that you're getting, the importance of body wisdom in our ability to be human and vulnerable, but also sustainable. This was not sustainable. So, as I started a new life, the question was, as a single person again, the question was, could I ever be in any significant relationships? Could I again be vulnerable? And how could I be vulnerable and also be able to look after myself? It was moving from a codependent relationship to what are known to be interdependent relationships. Now, there'll be other occasions when I'll expand more on the distinctions between codependent relationships and interdependent relationships. But just for the moment, that's why I've drawn this diagram here of me now not in this trapped, closed, contained codependent relationship, but now in a range of interdependent relationships. So here's me giving and receiving from this person, who also is in connection to this person giving and receiving, and shaped by these things, I actually am experiencing not only this person, but the impacts that this person has made on this person. And similarly, this person might experience me shaped by these persons. Now, it may be occasionally I will meet a person who also is in a codependent relationship, so hopefully I can help them bring about a change of dynamics, that this codependent relationship might become more interdependent, and then we have a much healthier and more sustainable practice through that. So I wanted to share that with you, because that experience of moving from codependency to interdependency and the ability to now negotiate the exposure I give to myself and share with others is crucial to this second module and the skills that I hope to share with you. Now, besides that experience with that counsellor and owning the grief of that loss of that relationship, the death effectively of that relationship, I've also found encouragement from the words of C.S. Lewis. Now, you may know of C.S. Lewis. He was the author of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. He also wrote a book called The Four Loves, and I would like to just read you a quote from that, because I think it says something about the challenge of being vulnerable and being wise. And he says, or he writes, "There is no safe investment. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even to an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. The alternative to tragedy, or at least to the risk of tragedy, is damnation. The only place outside of heaven where you can be perfectly safe from all the dangers and perpetrations of love is hell. Now, another author that I found very useful in reflecting on how do I negotiate vulnerability in a healthy way and why it's important to own that vulnerability is Dr. Margaret Shildrick, who's a bioethicist. And she suggests that vulnerability is something that's an inevitable and unavoidable part of being human. This is what she says. In place of seeing material contact as a risk to be averted, so material contact is that between us human beings and each other, we might instead begin to understand it as a promise that our embodied vulnerability and lack of closure signals not insecurity, but rather an openness to new forms of becoming and to new relational economies. In the move away from the fantasy of the wholly unified and self-complete embodied subject, we may lose the illusion of autonomy, but gain access to a more sustaining mode of becoming with others. And that idea of becoming with others is what's going on here. It is an illusion to think that we can be self-supporting in an absolute way, autonomous. We actually are created and born to need each other as human beings, rather than, of course, this codependent one, which is unsustainable. A final quote I'd like to give you also from C.S. Lewis that also speaks to the new risk of, if we're going to feel the good things, we also need to be prepared to feel also the painful things. So that's kind of paradoxical, but a necessary part of being human. And he writes in a book called A Grief Observed, in which his wife died of cancer. He says, "The pain I feel now is the happiness I had before. That's the deal." And that is indeed the deal as we recover our sense of what, or restoring what slipped away, what slips away, and now we resensitize to what has felt numb or needed to feel numb. So, what are the goals and the outcomes for this module? Firstly, it's about renewing inquiry, or that inquisitiveness of the world within us and the world outside us and around us and what moves around us. And by renewing that inquiry, we're renewing what it is that we sense in the world. Secondly, our second goal and outcome is renewing respect for yourself and respect for the distinctiveness of the world around you, the bodies around you, the persons around you. So this is an invitation to a discernment, a wisdom around how you know when to come near to things and when to step back from things. We'll explore that in the upcoming videos. And thirdly, a goal is to encourage you with boldness to reach out and resensitize and embrace and open up to all the sensations that are available both within and without, and allowing that to flow through you. So we don't have to contain these things. That's what often can lead to overwhelm. But we can let sensations come into us. We can savor them. We can feel both the pain and the delight, and then we can let it flow through us. So, as we wrap up this first section, in the comments below, I invite you, as you feel comfortable and feel safe, again reminding you about those the permission slips that you prepared as you started this course, and maybe you found you needed to adapt or change those. But if you might think, if there are experiences that have bruised you, please feel that you could share those so that we can learn from each other what have been some of the pains that have caused us to withdraw or to need to numb ourselves, to perhaps self-medicate in forms. That can be, that's not necessarily drugs or alcohol. Self-medication can be through things like eating lots of chocolate. So there are many ways that we can self-medicate where we try and numb or dull or disconnect from those painful, troubling feelings, but that actually then also cuts us from feeling the good feelings. This is one of the paradoxes of our bodies. So our third thing and the other thing you might like to share, are there things that have shocked you, that have really kind of caught you off guard, and that also led to that shutting down, that numbing, and not being able to feel things fully and freely and be present to them. So in the comments below, if you feel you can share some of those experiences, that'd be terrific. And I look forward to you in the next video, where we move now to what are the practical things that we can do to attend to resensitizing ourselves. See you then.